Golf Central on YouTube is brought to you by the new Chrome Tour golf ball from Callaway.
Today, our Todd Lewis found out more news involving Rory McIlroy that could have big implications on the PGA Tour's future. So we say hello to Todd. Todd, what were you able to find out?
Well, I can tell you, George, that Rory McIlroy will be a significant figure in trying to work out a deal between the PGA Tour and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Now, the PGA Tour Policy Board has established what is called the Transaction Subcommittee. Now, this group will be actively engaged in day-to-day negotiations with the PIF of Saudi Arabia, representing, of course, the PGA Tour. And then this subcommittee will report back to the PGA Tour Policy Board in regards to how the negotiations are going. In essence, they're going to be sitting, this group, this subcommittee, this transaction subcommittee will be sitting across the table with PIF and trying to get this deal done. Now, there are significant figures on this transaction subcommittee. Take a look at these names. First, Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour Commissioner, of course. Joe Gorder, who is the chairman and CEO of Valero, also the inaugural chairman of PGA Tour Enterprises. John Henry, the principal of Fenway Sports Group, part of Strategic Sports Group as well. Joe Ogilvy, former tour player, very successful in the financial world right now. Tiger Woods, one of the three players on this subcommittee as well, along with Adam Scott. And there you see Rory McIlroy, who will be on that committee despite not being a member of the PGA Tour Policy Board. I caught up with Rory after his round and asked him why it was important for him to be on this transaction subcommittee.
I think a different perspective, maybe more of a international and global perspective. And yeah, look, I think, you know, working with two really impressive businessmen, and John Henry and Joe Gorder, and, you know, them, you know, trying to, you know, they've done massive business deals in the past. And, you know, I guess my insight is more the picture of where the global game is and where it could go, and maybe my, you know, having, you know, good relationships on both sides, I think can help. So again, I put my hand up to just want to be helpful when Webb said that he was potentially going to step off, and this was, you know, this was sort of the lowest hanging fruit in terms of you know, how I could be helpful, but obviously without you know, assuming that seat of Webb's on the board. So happy to help, happy to try to, you know, give as much or as little input as anyone wants. And you know, the good thing is, you know, that's trucking along and moving forward. And, you know, I've already had two really good calls on that transaction committee, and you know, hopefully we can make some progress here over the next couple of months.
We're creeping up on the one-year anniversary of the framework agreement. Yeah. How imperative is it that this deal gets done rather quickly?
I think there's a window of opportunity here, and I think that window closes ever so slightly every day that passes by. So, yeah, I would say time is of the essence, absolutely.
Final thing, you mentioned yesterday about the possibility of you being on the policy board, that you felt like there were some members on the policy board were uncomfortable with you coming back. Do you feel like people will be on that board comfortable with you in this committee?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and when I said people uncomfortable, I wasn't necessarily saying people uncomfortable with me being on the board, uncomfortable with how I was coming back on the board, more the process and the governance side of things. You know, the boards went through an 8-month governance review here, and, you know, there's been a lot of work that's went into that, and sort of what I guess what Webb and I were trying to do sat outside of the scope of the governance. So that's, I think, was what, you know, where people were most uneasy. So if this is a way to get me involved in some way, and, you know, try to, you know, Webb's happy to stay back, you know, on there, which is great, because I think Webb has got such a reasonable and balanced and big picture view. So, you know, if I wasn't going to, and personally in my eyes, if I wasn't going to take that seat, the next best option was Webb staying on there, which is what happened.
A little more information about what Rory McIlroy was talking about there. In regards to him wanting to be on the PGA Tour Policy Board, if you remember, he resigned from the Policy Board last November. And yes, there were some players that were uncomfortable with him coming back, and those players are Tiger Woods, Patrick Cantlay, and Jordan Spieth. They were uncomfortable because he wouldn't be going through the proper protocols to be back on the PGA Tour Policy Board. That is what Rory McIlroy told me also today. And Rory said that he feels that Tiger, Patrick Cantlay, and Jordan Spieth are comfortable with him being on this transaction subcommittee. One big benefit for the PGA Tour is that Rory McIlroy does have a relationship with Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who is the governor of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. He's had several conversations with him, none of which, by the way, about him joining Live Golf. Now, this 7-member transaction subcommittee is expected to be made official by the PGA Tour later this evening. George?
All righty, thank you, Todd. And we'll definitely be main characters when it comes to advancing these negotiations going forward with the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Rory McIlroy also went on to say in his conversation that he shared with Tiger Woods, leading to his placement on this transaction subcommittee. I think friends can have disagreements or not see things eye to eye. I think that's fine, but I wouldn't say we had a really good talk last Friday for 45 minutes or so about different things. There's no strain there with him and Tiger. So Rory off of one spot and lands on another, and it seems like it's nonstop where the pendulum swings. He wants to get away from this, then he wants to be front and center. Only having stars on this transaction subcommittee, that's what's best for the game going forward?
Well, certainly they do bring a lot of star power to it, but I think they bring a pragmatic approach, an informed approach, and I think they're all three really bright people. I don't know that anybody could say with a clear eye exactly what's best for the PGA Tour going forward. But the best way to solve that riddle is to have the most well-informed, the most pragmatic, the most reasonable voices heard. And any way you want to slice it, that is Rory, and that is Adam Scott. Now, I understand the protocols being placed onto the board, but there is already precedent for getting around those protocols with Tiger Woods being on that board. I certainly understand Tiger Woods being on that board. But the thing I'll say about Rory, and I've had a chance to talk with Adam Scott earlier this year at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, and I would say the same thing about Adam Scott, is Rory, in a world that is so full of dogma and dogmatism, this is a guy who will change his opinion. And that's what I mean by reasonable. He'll have an opinion because I don't know anybody in the golf space who is better informed than Rory. I went to dinner with him at one point last year, and not only did he keep up to date on every single podcast that was relevant, but he knew who was doing the podcast. He knew who was writing the stories. He could quote who said what, where, and when. And at no point did he get his ire raised by things that were being written about him that maybe might not have been that accurate. And even to this point, when you hear perhaps some feathers getting ruffled about him getting on the board, there's no animosity in his voice. It's reasoned. And that's what you need right now. And you look at all those people in that room, there's a lot of experience there. There's a lot of power in the golf space there. And I think if there's going to be any chance of getting concessions back and forth between the two, you need all of that experience and all of that power and all of that pragmatism in that room.
So you're saying that's why you need to have your star power lineup sitting across from Yasser. You want Tiger, Rory, and Adam Scott, and not go further on down the line for guys who have served for years but could be ranked 50 to 150th in the world.
Well, that would describe Joe Ogilvy. I mean, Joe Ogilvy was one of those types of players. Joe wasn't a star, but he's made himself a star in the financial world, and I think he's gained the trust and the respect of everybody on the PGA Tour with him diving in, rolling up his sleeves, informing himself, and trying to make the PGA Tour a better spot. Look, the PGA Tour is in this pickle, like it or not. But do you want to compete indefinitely with somebody who's not going to go away, who can outspend you, and if they're in business, every move they make that makes their tour better deletes your tour and causes more division within the tour? So the time is now, to Rory's point about making a deal. I wouldn't have said that a year ago. I don't think there's a lot of people in the world of golf that would be particularly enamored with the idea of making this deal. But it is the better end of the bargain at this point.
But I would say that the cynic for the rank and file PGA Tour player with Rory would say, okay, well, he's been blowing with the breezes. based on how his point of view changes every 60 to 90 days. And he seems to only be leading in his own self-interest versus what's best for the entirety of the membership with his public posturing.
Well, I don't know that that's the case.
With
I've heard
limited
Rory,
fields, no cut events.
Well, he has said that more recently, but early on he was talking about how he would be in favor of all of the players being under contract. In other words, being told what to do, where to go, and when to do it. I see him as a guy who will change his opinion when evidence comes along that contradicts his opinion for the betterment of the game. Maybe this is where he's at right now. And look, I would differ with him on that. When he talks about smaller fields going globally, I would say that didn't work with the WGCs. What makes you think it's going to work right now, especially with the TV ratings being down? I would disagree with Rory. But you want somebody on the other side of the table that you would disagree with, who is reasoned and who is pragmatic, and there's that back and forth and that quid pro quo between the two. You don't want to surround yourself with just people that agree with you. You want people on that board that do disagree with you, and I think that's healthy to have on that board.